library. Probably standing too close to a speaker. Is
that me? Or
a little bit of feedback. I want to welcome you. I'm so pleased you came out today with the weather as beautiful as it is. We should be out sailing. But this is supposed to be a fall Sunday. It's masquerading as a glorious midsummer day, I would say. Anyway, I want to do a couple of little commercials for upcoming library programs before we start. Coming up on the 30th, we have an evening with the author program, and it's Deborah Crombie who's going to be speaking. She's a notable author and has been nominated and won many awards, including New York Times Book of the Year. She'll be here to talk about her latest mystery novel, Dwell in Darkness. Following Sunday, if you come back, it's going to be a whole change of atmosphere. We're going to have a folk trio here, Bartholomew Cappers and Waynan, and they will be here at 3 o'clock. But today we have a wonderful program that's going to take us pretty far away from home. We have Brian McPhillips, a local physician in Cohasset and a Hingham resident, and an avid sailor. He took a 3-month break from his practice in early 2013 to serve as medical officer and trainee aboard the three-masted tall ship, Picton Castle. Picton Castle is a completely refitted, exactly 179-foot bark. Dr. McPhillips will show slides and talk of his adventures on the bark, which sails out of Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. The ship travels around the world on a mission to provide trainees with the adventure of sailing the open ocean while teaching and preserving traditional sailing skills and seamanship. In case you're interested after you see this, and you want to do it too, there's a 2015 there's a tall ship series that will be kicking off on the East Coast, going up the East Coast to Canada, from Florida or Georgia, I don't know if it's been determined yet, right up to Nova Scotia. The Picton Castle, this ship, will be participating. So anyway, we're going to get you all excited. You're going to sign up and go do this. So I want to turn it over to Brian, and I thank him for coming out and doing this. And Ernie Sophus, who's in the audience here, connected me with Brian, and I'm really delighted. As I said, this is a terrific turnout for such a beautiful day. We dodged the Patriots. We carefully planned. I have to tell you, Brian and I went back and forth on email to say, okay, we can do it. We're not going to be fighting the Patriots. And I knew the Red Sox weren't going to be a factor.
That's right.
So, sad to say, because I do love them. Anyway, let me turn it over to Brian, and we'll go sailing. Thank you.
That's great. All right. Thank you. All right. Again, yeah, everybody here okay? And I don't know if this feedback is me or not. Everybody here? Good. All right. Good. Well, yeah, thank you. We didn't expect to be competing with 88 degrees in September, but anyway, glad you could come out, and we will be done in time to enjoy a little more this afternoon. And I start with a minor disclaimer. I'm not a public speaker. My world is as a physician. I talk to people one-on-one, or maybe with parents 3-on-1, but not big audiences as a rule. But my good friend Doug Ryan, another sailor locally, member of Hull Yacht Club, told me, didn't ask me, told me, when you come back, you will be giving a talk at the Yacht Club. Take a lot of pictures and be prepared. So I was able to do it there once, and another dry run at Old Ship Church with our friend Ernie Sophus, and his idea to say, well, how about the library for the people that don't fit into either of those groups? So I'm glad you could come and can share this. So anyway, here she is. If you saw the pictures elsewhere, probably. But I always like to start with the basic question. How does a full-time physician, husband, father, get to take 3 months off, from practice and just go the other half of the world and have a little adventure like this? And I thought I'd give a little background on what led to this event. First, I graduated high school in 1976, and the bicentennial of the United States was celebrated one way in the New York City area with a huge tall ship festival. I lived in the New York suburbs at the time, and I can't exactly remember, but I picture myself as probably as an obnoxious 18-year-old my mother's saying, I don't care what you think, we're going to see these tall ships, you know. And the drinking age was 18, and so I think I probably had some beer offers somewhere that you know, summer of July 4th or whatever it was. But anyway, I was dragged to watch this parade up the Hudson River, and I don't remember, 40, 50, something like that, tall ships went one after another. And you know, all I can say is there was probably a seed sown, because you know, maybe why many of you are here, you know, for some of us, you see a tall ship and you just sort of tingle. You say, there's nothing more spectacular in the world than the sight of a tall ship, especially you know, if they get the sails up and they're moving beautifully. So anyway, nice picture here. My lovely wife Janice. 4 years later, I'm going to medical school, where the tuition at Georgetown was the ungodly $12,000 a year. $12,000. No one could imagine paying that, because it was about double most schools. So more than half of my class joined the military to get school paid for. And I joined the Navy because I had two uncles that went to Annapolis, and but mostly because they had the best looking uniforms, I think. And so anyway, free medical education, but I had to pay back you know, with time. So I ended up having 9 years in the Navy. First 5 were at Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital in San Diego area, and then in Newport, Rhode Island. And interesting, my connection with the sea in the Navy was that I was the family physician for this ship, the USS Simpson, a fast frigate, but they only had 200 men. And that's not enough to take a doctor when you actually go, you know, into sea or on a deployment. So they would have medics and corpsmen, and they would travel with big aircraft carriers with all the doctors on board. So when they were in port, I was their doctor, but when they were at sea, I stayed home and took care of their families. So I had 3 days at sea in 9 years, and they were basically the days that the Simpson was probably about to deploy, you know, and they would have family day, and they would literally leave Newport, take a day, go around Block Island or down to, you know, Montauk and back. And you had to have a doctor on board in case one of the wives, there were no women in the Navy at the time, not on ships. So one of the wives or children injured themselves or got seasick, I could give them medicine or stitch them. The medics could not, since they were 19-year-old, you know, medically trained, but not physicians. You know, that would be practicing without a license. So I was required to go 3 days. That was it. You know, fast forward, Navy ends. I move here to Hingham. And after not having a boat for a while, I will say the Navy led to me taking sailing lessons, and I really probably developed my passion for sailing. Used to joke, your tax dollars at work. It was about $3 or $4 an hour to take out a 25 or 30-foot sailboat. And so you could take your non-Navy friends out and say, I got this one, you know, 4 hours, $12, you know. And so it was easy to sail a lot and not expensive. But then eventually we got our own boat. This is Analgesic, our Catalina 34. All right, I think we've had her for 10 or 11 years now, and sailed pretty much from mid-coast Maine all the way down to Long Island, and you know, usually a 1 or 2 week trip every summer with the family, and a lot of day cruises. And you know, this has been feeding the passion for sailing ever since. Anyway, this being a library, you have to show books. So you know, this is how I get through the winter. I have a love of reading nautical literature, and there's plenty of it out there. And you know, many of them, you know, just grab you. You keep going, and they make you think about the spring will get here eventually. One in particular has stood out over the years. Richard Henry Dana, 2 years before the Mast, and again, some of you may have heard of it, and I'll start with this talk, Before the Mast, explain where that came from. Dana was a Harvard student, I think I wrote down 1840. He contracted measles, and apparently it caused some eye inflammation, and his doctors at the time said, you got to stop reading for a while. You should go to sea and let the salt air take care of you. So his family had the means where he could have simply gone and been a passenger and sailed for a while, but he declared, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, you know, the real way. I'm going to be a sailor, a common ordinary seaman. And the place called Before the Mast is the part of a ship in front of the furthest forward mast, the foremast. That's where the sailors lived. It was supposedly, you know, dank, humid, smelly. Their hammocks swung in there, but it was where they would eat. It was their social life when they were not working on deck. And so, you know, that's how he chose to call his talk as Before the Mast, which is essentially what I was like him in a little bit more modern, but not much more modern ship. So anyway, all I can tell you is he was a great writer, in my opinion, and vivid descriptions of life at sea, everything from climbing the rigging to change sails in hail and snow, gales, to the sunburn of the tropics, and the endless work maintaining the ship. But also he beautifully described, moonlit nights with the sails looking like statues and pulling, and just the sound of the water and the wind, and just describing how magical that was. So, he covered the whole extreme. So read the book, loved it, but my magazine, Sail Magazine, had this ad, I think what I wrote, fall of 2009, a little bit blurry, but it says, join us May of 2010, experience life as crew on a traditional tall ship, explore tropical islands, memories of a lifetime, blah blah blah. And I just remember saying, oh, that was never on the list of possibilities. But it's kind of, they basically say check our website, and then you check their website, and one more of these guys, just a second, and they have this. Yeah. So, actually it's a 9-minute video. There's a lot more of that. I tried to just find a section to capture it, but I think that was the intro. They go into more interviews with the captain and crew and describing the experience. But all I can say is, the old goosebumps, and I emailed them, and kind of said, you guys take a doctor, and I was in the Navy, and I like to sail, and I've never been seasick a day in my life, and feel like I'm your man. And sooner, no sooner they said, not only do we want you, but can you come in a couple of months, because we have 4 legs for this round of the world voyage. The last 3 are taken, but we need a doctor for the first one. And I actually was just about to have hip surgery, and I would have been 2 months after, and I kind of said, I don't think so. Not good timing, and it would have been May to September, and my brilliant wife said, not only that, why would you ever leave here May to September to go to the tropics, How about November till, February or something like that? Get out of here in the winter. So a lot of sense. So anyway, we kind of said, I can't do it this time, but we stayed in touch, and a lot of emails back and forth. And when they did, I followed their whole voyage, their blog the whole way. It's just constantly exciting and new things to learn about. And then I basically, was given the first pick with the next voyage, and their legs, there's some scheduled changes. Originally I was going to join them in the Caribbean, but as it worked out, they were going to leave Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, their home port, and go through the canal and get out to the South Pacific and Tahiti, and then the next leg would begin in Tahiti, and the leg's usually about 3.5 months long. So I signed up for the second one, and after I just eventually became official. This is a letter you get that's literally like military orders. It actually serves a good purpose, because you can't get off a plane in Tahiti unless you got a return ticket. But this is the alternative, is that I'm actually going to be leaving by ship. So this was the dates. Now, just one little comment. It says, on or about February 8th. That's sort of key, because schedules were not very rigid. But anyway, so that was when it all started to become very real for me. So I have great friends locally here. This is my friend Steve DeMann, who said, well, if you're going to Polynesia, we're going to have a pig roast. And he does stuff like this, and I just love the picture of his dog with the old, there but for the grace of God, we're going to go high. But anyway, sorry, Janice, she doesn't like this picture, but I think it was, so we all wore our best Polynesian clothes, and there were nice farewell speeches. And, all I can say is, when it was my turn, I said, the old Lou Gehrig, I think I'm the luckiest man alive. I have a family that supports me. I actually have a practice that supports me, a group of, 5 doctors, 5 nurse practitioners. They could do without me for a little while. We called it my maternity leave or something like that. But anyway, it was really time to go. And I just thought this was a fun slide to see, because you basically have to pack everything into a duffel bag. They don't allow those boxy roll-on luggage because it doesn't fit in the storage. So it has to be one duffel bag, one backpack for 3.5 months. So that's it. All on the top of my bed, and no more room. So anyway, I thought I'd pause here for just a second and just go back to saying what is the Picton Castle. Actually, a lot of it is some of the details were in the introduction, but she was basically the dream fulfilled of our captain. This is Captain Daniel Moreland. So he's a master mariner of, who knows, 40, 45 years at sea. But his passion has always been tall ships, and he's evolved into teaching traditional seamanship. And he kind of came up with this idea that, it would be more attractive if you really do sail around the world. There's this subset of people out there who would love to sail around the world the old way. And also by being under, a tall ship, they could actually visit much more exotic ports where they were completely willing to just drop anchor anywhere, which, your average cruise ship, has strict limitations and harbor sizes. They don't have any of that. They can just kind of go anywhere, and that's kind of what they do. They specifically go places that nobody else goes. Anyway, great history here. Little lines at the bottom, but the ship was actually built 1928 in Wales as a fishing trawler, not a sailboat. You can see she was a steamship, and served that way for quite a while. She was then a World War II minesweeper for the British. And then I guess was in 1955 had a complete refit and became a cargo ship. And we actually used it for cargo transport as well for part of our missions. But anyway, I think mainly Scandinavian. I'm not sure which country, no one ever told me, but one of the Scandinavian countries was her home port for a while. And then I think it was sort of abandoned or, just for sale. The captain saw her and felt that she had the proper lines with the right, TLC to make it into a tall ship. And, it's not like you can't like buy an old tall ship, right? They're not available, and to build one from scratch is just tremendously expensive, prohibitively. So, but he did raise $2 million in 2 years, and he basically got her ship-shape to sail to Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, her current home base. And this is what they did. A lot of interesting things. You can, obviously added the mast, made her a pointy bow, kind of a cutter design, so all that was welded steel. Her hull was made of steel. But they changed the whole bow shape. But otherwise, they poured cement into the bilge to make it bottom heavy so that it wouldn't tip over with the sail pressures. And actually, I'm not used to pointers, but a couple things. You'll hear me talk about some areas. This was called the forecastle head up here. It's the top deck where you do forward lookout. Midship is where the cargo hold was, which is a big platform that opened and cargo could go down below into the lower level. This upper area back here we call the quarterdeck, and that's where steering takes place, plus the chart house where all the electronics and whoever's running the watch, the mate or the captain, would be kind of going back and forth, between the charts, the conditions, and then they're just looking with their eyes and ears at the steering and everything. And then right below back here is called the aloha deck, and that's where we would eat, where food would be laid out if the weather was allowing, and there's a place to do dishes, called the scullery back there as well. So those are the basic areas. The other thing is that, again, the lower masts were made of steel, and the lower yard arms, which are the cross pieces, were made of steel. The top were made of wood. Both the yard arms, this is called the royal and the topgallant, upper topsail, lower topsail, and then it would be the main or the foremast. But anyway, so steel lower, wood upper. And the interesting thing is that's a safety feature that, in the old days, everything was wood. But wood breaks and steel doesn't. So if you were ever in a hurricane or the forces were too great and the ship was possibly getting knocked over, things were chosen in materials so they would actually break, and now you lose a lot of that top heaviness, and you fix it later, but you save the ship. So that was a design feature of ships throughout the years. Anyway, I think we said earlier, 179 feet long, actually 100 feet to the top of the mast, 24 feet beam, 24 feet wide. 278 tons, and let's see, a couple of the traditional things. Sails all made by hand from traditional cotton canvas. Incredible process when you think about it. 19 sails, and and we were constantly repairing the existing ones, but there was always a replacement if one was totally destroyed for some reason. And then they all age. It's cotton, so they get moldy, they get old, and they need replacement. Natural fiber hemp lines, as opposed to the modern synthetic lines, they also got old in the sun and would break, so it was constantly we were constantly replacing them. The other interesting thing is, of course, I arrived with my sailor's gloves because we were always worried about rope burns when we sail around here. Captain said, throw them away, no gloves allowed. That's why they invented calluses, but I guess part of the idea with these hemp lines is that if you got some of your fabric caught in a line and then it suddenly got tense, the fabric could be grabbed and then it could rip your fingers off or take you with it. It could take your whole body with the line if it was flying loose. So So calluses were the order of the day. And basically the crew, I have a couple of comments to make. The great last minute surprise was, I signed up for this, but they didn't tell me totally what I signed up for. He said, oh, and my fiance Tammy and my baby Dawson will be traveling with us as well. So not only was I the crew's doctor, but I was also the baby's doctor. And I truly had nightmares or bad dreams in anticipation, thinking, what's the leading cause of death in children in the world? It's diarrhea. So let's go travel to third world countries with a baby, and and have a doctor who hasn't started an IV on a baby in 20 years, and everyone looks at me. Are you going to save him or not? Anyway, the good news is he stayed healthy the whole trip, but it was a little wrinkle that I hadn't been planning for. Other members of the crew, just a lot of these pictures, everyone's dressed up because I thought some of our best pictures were at our last party, which we'll get to at the very end. But so in the middle is Donald, our cook from Grenada. Kate Addison, who for some reason has the nickname Bob, which no one ever explained, but she's Bob, and she's from England. She was the purser, so she basically did all the finances of the ship and paid the crew. Most interesting guy of all, probably DB, David Brown. He's from Pitcairn Island. If people have heard of it, maybe it's where the Bounty wound up after the mutiny. Currently, they have 50 residents of Pitcairn. People call it the most remote island inhabited on the planet. That they get very, very rarely visited by anybody. But when you live in a place with 50 people, you can fix anything, because you have no other choice. And he can fix anything. This guy was 26 years old, and the diesel broke, the plumbing broke, this broke, he did some welding, he did some steel fabrication, and he's kind of like your average probably 50-year-old who'd been working in a whatever machine shop all his life, and probably the most valuable member of the crew. Some other highlights. Some of these are trainees, but in the back there is Nadja. Nadja's from Germany. She was the second mate for most of my voyage. First mate Sam from Texas, and third mate Allison. She was the head of my watch. When you ask her where she's from, she always says, pauses. My parents currently here in Virginia. I've lived in San Diego, but she's basically been on tall ships since she graduated from Colgate University about 9 or 10 years ago. So she really has gone ship to ship to ships. She's been by to visit us a couple of times. She was here this summer. She's currently on the Niagara out of Erie, Pennsylvania, and then she usually goes to Florida when the weather turns cold for ships down there. And then the younger guys are deckhands at the lowest level, still getting paid, and then lead seamen one level above that. And these are ranks just like military ranks with more responsibility and authority. So Victor on the left from Denmark is a lead seaman, and Gabe, you hear a lot about Gabe later in the talk. Gabe was a deckhand, and he was my immediate supervisor. So on my watch, he gave out assignments and did a lot of the instruction that I had. And then, unfortunately, John Guerreri was going to be here today. He lives in Grafton, Mass. He was our sailmaker. He's actually been on the ship 3 times, and he's leaving tomorrow for Bali, and he's going to complete the trip. Nice, lucky guy that he doesn't work for the last 6 years or so. He's a co-owner in the ship. He's an investor, and so he's been able to travel on the ship a few times, and now he said I was going to come, but he's got to pack. He's got too many things to do before he leaves. So, but anyway, so sailmaker. He both did the sailmaking, but also taught the sailmaking. All right, so anyway, back to the voyage. So I mentioned the timing thing. I was able to travel with Janice, my wife. We had a nice 9 or 10 day trip to Tahiti and Maria, and it was a big send-off, and then she was supposed to be there as the ship arrives, and I get on board, and we wave goodbye, and she goes home, except the ship was delayed 10 days, 1,000 miles east of us in the Gambier Islands because of adverse wind and waves. So basically, poor me, I was going to be stuck in Tahiti alone, but instead of that, I found this airline that flies twice a week to these Gambier Islands. Interesting flight, 1,000 miles, fairly low altitude the whole way, did not see an island the entire way. Apparently French Polynesia, we were going from the west end to the east end, 1,000 miles, there were 90 some islands between us. We didn't see a one, so you're just over water, and it didn't feel like we were very high, and then we start descending and you don't see anything, and all of a sudden some land appears, and the island of Mangareva, which is sort of an atoll, which has got a lot of little sandy, surrounding smaller islands. The airport was uninhabited. This was it. I said it looked like a bus stop when you pulled up, and nobody lives here. They kind of ferry out for a day's work, and then plane lands, plane leaves, and I get on a 45-minute ferry across the lagoon, and then my first glimpse of the ship at the dock here at Mangareva. A couple of things to point out. These are our ships you'll see more. This is called a monomoy, which is a small sailing and rowing vessel that we use for both little harbor adventures and for training on small boats. And then the skiff in front was used both for ferrying us from anchorages into docks, and also it was our emergency boat. If we had a man overboard, for drills, we would lower it and go chase the person because it's so hard to slow the ship down. And then finally, it was our little tugboat. So when we'd come into harbors, we would drop it, and they would usually push or pull the bow around because we didn't have a bow thruster. So to fight winds and tides, we could maneuver right up to docks. So anyway, I arrived. I'm the newbie. There's one other guy on the plane with me, and we sort of like, what do we do? We came. There's John again, and they he said, this is what they do. A captain overseeing the layout of a new sail to replace one of the aging ones. So whenever they had a big space like this, they would take advantage and do the cutting, and then they could actually start the hand sewing once we got to sea. So I walked around the village. There wasn't much going on here, and everybody was in this stand-down mode, having had to sit there for 10 days. That's what the crew hates more than anything. Sorry about that. But everybody sort of gets tired and lazy. But then I get my tour, and this is the salon. This is where we lived. So the salon, a few things to point out. My bunk was that one right there, and then underneath you can see a bench. Under each 2 bunks, there was 2 bench holes. So you had actually pretty good storage space. But again, you just couldn't fit normal luggage in. So you could stuff a lot of things in there. And you had some shelves and a reading light. And then very good curtains for darkness because people could be sleeping any time of day or night depending on the watch they were on. A nice library up here, lots of books that people would take and leave. I noticed the apparel that men generally didn't wear shirts a lot because the average temperature was about 88 degrees and it was always humid. On deck it was pleasant, but with the air moving, sort of pleasant. But down below it was very stagnant. Oh, sorry, accident there. And these are the medical chests, 6 chests of medical equipment. And by type, there was IVs, there was drugs, there was splinting, and just over-the-counter creams and lotions and things like that. So that was my my department there. And then you can kind of see these floorboards. This was called the sole, and this went all the way out. Imagine the ship. This distorts it a little bit. It's 24 feet wide. Underneath the entire ship, you could crawl and could pick up a board and go looking for things. And they literally had miles and miles of those hemp lines and massive rolls of the canvas, and then a complete set of replacement sails. So all 19 sails were bundled up, and so a whole lot of packed-in storage there. So this is where we lived. And so let's see. So next morning, and I just want to comment, got a little orientation, got my safety brief, got my first meal, met the crew, and then I crawled in the bunk and started, just kind of laughed because I started sweating, and that didn't stop for the next 3 months. Basically, it was the bunk was soaked with sweat all the time. You'd get in, you'd create a huge wet zone, you'd move and be dry for a while, you'd be wet, drenched the whole time, and that was just the life. The dirtiest, kind of smelliest crew you can imagine. And we had showers, but you take a shower and then you start sweating as soon as you get out. So anyway, that was my introduction to what was to be. Next morning, Captain calls muster after breakfast. Memorable line. He's often few words, but said a lot. He said, ports make ships and sailors rusty. Time to get serious. And first mate, prepare the ship, for going to sea. So, and then the first mate, he would sort of give a quick itinerary what we would be doing, and then the first mate would give out assignments. So my assignment, Gabe again was going to teach me lashing. People loosen up, take bikes out, take stuff out, and all this, there's a lot of stuff that then needs to be secured for the rolling seas ahead. So there's a specific type of lashing knots. So anyway, this was the cargo hold, and that's where all the action was. I went down with Gabe, and several hours. I just love to say it. I went down there with a nice clean T-shirt, clean shorts, clean hands, and within 2 or 3 hours, I was as dirty as everybody else in here. It was like an incredibly dirty, dusty environment, and just again, hot steam bath. And so by lunchtime, I felt like now I fit in because I'm as dirty as everybody else. My clothes and everything about me, and that didn't change for the duration. So anyway, then lunch, and then push off, and we go to sea, and next thing I'm just sort of like lollygagging, like, isn't it pretty? And the captain says, up and loose all sail, and all these. And I should actually one important comment. The leg ended there, but 5 people left and 3 joined, but everybody else stayed on. So the majority of the trainees were staying on for the second leg, so they all had this 3 or 4 months experience already. So up and loose all sail means everybody but the 3 new guys start doing stuff like this, running up a loft, going out, untying sails, and then when we get down, they start calling orders. Set the fore lower topsail. And And so they all run the lines, they all know what they're doing. And finally Gabe said, just follow me, Doc, follow me. Just when I pull, you pull, when I stop, you stop, So this is what it was, and it was sail to sail. And literally the crew in about 1 to 2 minutes could take a sail from being kind of loosely hanging to, fully taut and drawing wind, and then, secured, and then they set the next sail. So over a certain amount of time is a whole lot of, hard work, but then there she is. She's all set up and ready to go. And then, of course, you can picture the deck was complete and total spaghetti, just lines and lines everywhere. I think someone told me recently, the captain, I had a hard time learning lines. I'll get back to that in a minute, but the captain said that, I didn't get the teaching that those guys got when they were new. So he kind of said, every sail has 7 lines to port, 7 to starboard for loosening them, and 4 for tightening, all that. So there was sort of much more of an organization than I was led to believe. But anyway, what anybody can do is coil and hang. The order comes, all right, everything is good, coil and hang. And this is what I did 10,000 times, if not 20,000 times. Basically, you coiling and hanging, and it's sort of you bend over, you try to make perfect coils, and you hang it just a certain way. And of course, it's sort of boot camp like, where the mates, my 22-year-old boss and 29-year-old hired boss would come over and say, "That's no good," and throw it on the deck. Do it again. And you're like, "Oh, okay." And you want to hit somebody, but you don't. But it definitely was humbling. And maybe a good interlude right here to say, I was given the option of just being the doctor. And the captain told me, "You can do that if you want, but it's not the same experience. You can read your books all day and get your good suntan, but don't be surprised when we get to port and everybody's going out to have fun. They don't know you, and they're not going to invite you. You will not be part of the crew." And a lot of the crew is a lot younger than me, but this is what I signed up for, and so it could be backbreaking at times, is bending and one after another. But anyway, the point of this was that they try to make it clear that it has to be done perfectly every time, and so that when you're doing this in the hurry or in the dark, you've got to be able to grab any line and know what you're going to get. There can't be any surprises, and tangles can kill people. If something doesn't fly freely appropriately, someone gets arm or leg gets caught. The tremendous force on these lines could take someone overboard, or rip a limb off practically, or fingers at least. So anyway, had to be perfect, and we had plenty of practice. When all was said and done, though, this is what you had. You had these rails, and they were all over the ship, and multiplied by somewhere between 175 and 200. Every time you read it, someone gives a different number of how many lines there are, but the rows and all organized like that. So anyway, we got the ship going, and again, you saw some of this, those who came in early, but this is what you get. And again, when we left Mangareva, it was just absolutely perfect conditions. The wind was the right speed, the right angle, the sails were set, and the sky was blue, everything was good. And really what commenced then was the I'll say the perfect introduction for me, because we were basically sailing back to Tahiti, and we had great sailing days at first, but then we then lost all wind for about 2 days, and after you kind of ran the engine, it gets kind of hot without any breeze blowing. And the captain at the end of the second day was Valentine's Day, and he said, we're going to have a swim call. The pool will be open in a half an hour. So basically, we put out a swing rope. I think you saw in that opening video, you could jump and do flips if you wanted. We actually had a shark lookout. That gets your attention. They send someone up the rigging to basically scan the horizon for sharks. And then, then the captain announced 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and everybody jumps in. And fascinating experience. The blueness I had never seen. It's I always say these look like they're touched photos. We're all used to the green Boston Harbor, but this, I asked the captain, why so blue? And he said, because it's 2 miles deep. Why not? So it's interesting to be floating in 2 miles of water. And the other thing is the swells out there, of course, give you this huge, like 6, 7, 8 foot rise, but they're so far apart, they don't feel like much. But then you're in the water looking up at a ship, and the ship goes up 8 feet, and it literally looks like it's coming on you. It's a very interesting optical illusion. And then getting out was another adventure, because the ladder, literally gets 8 feet above, and then you have to time it and do a quick grab and go, or you miss it and you got to wait a turn, and a few false alarms there. And then the big reality is everyone else has their tough feet and calluses from being barefoot for months. I took some pictures on that forecastle head and came down one of the steel ladders, which, stairways, ladders on the ship are called, is what they're called. And then I slipped. And did I slip? I came down and cracked my head on a steel step and rocked me like I've never been rocked. And I'm sure I probably had a mild concussion, hurt my neck. Everybody would, they all like gasped, like what happened? And And then, and we, the wake up that we were 500 miles from land, and there's no Coast Guard out there. Like, you can't call for anything, So basically, I got very, very lucky. But I would tell you, I think I went from sort of being like, what a great vacation, to like, you better pay better attention from now on. And I also put Tevas on and never slipped again for the most part. I just never felt good barefoot like everyone else. It was Valentine's Day, and they started to reveal who the couples were. They called it Marlin Spike. Marlin Spike was our name for a party, and they'd usually have some kind of a weak rum punch, and they'd make popcorn, and that Bob the purser, she would decorate the ships. She was like the rah-rah, cheerleader. So she'd make everything, nice for Valentine's Day. And, we got everybody that music and dancing, and everybody you can see having a good time. So you do get a sense of the age, though. There was interesting, we said of the trainees, most of these people you're seeing are the trainees who signed on. Many of them were, we said they were the kids and the adults. The kids were all kind of 17 to 22, many kind of in gap year from college or whatever. Their, parents could afford to, pay for them to do this. And then adults, people like me who are, different level of maturity, they left us Joe Goldenberg from Toronto, a lawyer who was getting tired of being a criminal lawyer, needed a break, and we had a philosophy professor. We had John the sailmaker. We had a retiree from the university system in Nova Scotia who was 68, our oldest crew member. So it's just two good groups of folks, but different worldviews. We'll get more of that later. And then it was sort of the end of a perfect day. This was after the party was over. And it kind of highlights what we saw almost every night if the weather was good, because we were sailing west, almost the whole time. So we're sailing into the sunset, and you're looking forward at that every evening. All right. So anyway, this was I threw in for the interesting point. As you can see that right there, that was seeing land after 9 days at sea. And the interesting thing is no ships the whole time. Really no airplanes. It occurred to me when I heard an airplane like weeks later that, wow, that's a sound I have not heard. So we just might have been out of the flight path, for however you cross the Pacific, being as far south as we were. And, and just nothing. There was just nothing but water for the entire time. And then this. And you can't imagine, there was sort of this buzz like, land, land. And, you hear that and you see it in movies and the old books and everything. But it was an incredible kind of palpitation experience, like, wow, we're really going to make it to land. And it was just incredibly thrilling. And cameras came out like me, and everybody was just and what are you looking at? You're not looking at much, but it was a thrill. And then this is interesting because it's not my video, but I found it on their website. But then we had a squall. Literally a couple hours later, our first squall came in, and this sort of captures like the captain could see it coming on radar. He immediately sent the most experienced crew up to I'm not sure why that's not going, but there we go. A little buffering anyway. Try again, but anyway, he had probably about 5 minutes warning that we were about to get slammed, and so they went up and stowed and tightened all the top sails, and the wind kicked up to 40 or 50 miles an hour quickly, and there was a little tense because normally with a square rig you just aim with the wind and the waves and you just go, and actually. But this land was in front of us, and we would have been driven right into the land. So we had to change our course a little, and yet we had kept 4 sails up. And as a local sailor, I can tell you that 30 knots tends to scare me a lot. This was wild and noisy, and I was thinking, oh my God, is this how people die at sea? And then you look up at the captain, and he's kind of like, yeah, and the first mate, everything's working, and then after it was all over, it went on for about 2 hours. And then he called another muster. The winds came down, set the sails again. And he kind of just complimented everybody. He said everybody did their job. And he said, this is what tall ships do. They're designed to handle anything nature throws them pretty much. And we did it right. And that's how you sail a ship, wind 50-mile-an-hour winds. So, it's like, all right, good. And then, you get things over and your confidence builds slowly. And then the captain gave the next speech. He said, these are the islands of Tahiti rising. And he said, you're now just like Captain Cook, 1768. He sailed from England, and this was his goal. And he saw these islands, these peaks rising out of the ocean. And he knew he had arrived, and it's the same view. You can't tell anybody lives there from this angle. But, and for many of our shipmates, they had come from Nova Scotia. For me, as my first stop. For them, it was they crossed, most of the Pacific. And again, a big thrilling experience to approach. All right, so, Anyway, thought I'd take a break from the itinerary and just kind of go over the daily routine. And the entire time I was on board, I was on a 4 to 8 watch, which meant my group worked 4 to 8 a.m. and 4 to 8 p.m. So my day began with a 3:30 whisper in the ear, someone saying, you know, Doc, it's 3:30, time to get up, and increasingly louder until they wake you. That was the rule. And and then they basically you stumbled out of bed in the darkness because there's sleeping people around you that weren't getting up, and you'd get dressed. And you know, so basically, again, my Tevas, which was my footwear. Most people are barefoot, but that was my grip. This is my safety harness and my rig, 2 different belts. The safety harness was for clipping on when you were aloft or in any precarious place on the rail. And the rig was an extremely big and sharp knife that could cut any line with one swipe, which was a safety thing. You know, they always say you could save your own life or someone else's, and it never happened to me. But we also use them. We're using them all the time. And the second thing, an actual marlin spike. We say that's the name for our party, but it's also this great big metal spike you can use to untie knots. You can use it to tighten, you know, tools and and I don't know, bolts and nuts and everything. So there's just these two hanging tools that you had, and that was part of your uniform. And of course, we all, you know, had our local pride. That was the last championship, so my Red Sox champions shirts, everybody liked that. And again, the mandatory dirt that was part of it. Anyway, the day, you know, so how would the day begin? You know, Gabe, we'd muster at 10 of 4. Gabe would give out assignments. One person take over the helm, which is steering. One person go to forward lookout. And then everybody else would then do a tour of the ship. And we would go and really look at the lines. And, you know, a lot of times if it was raining, they would get tighter, something about the way the hemp contracted. And if you didn't loosen them, they'd snap. And that happened on an unfortunately regular basis. Then you'd have to replace them once the sun came up. And otherwise, if they've been stretched all night, they would get loose, you know, and then you have to make them tighter again. So there's just a whole lot of, you know, adjustments. And then, of course, coil and hang. You know, let's coil and hang another 50 lines. So that might be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour, and then there's possibly sail handling. You know, the course change. You know, we're going to adjust all the sails, and you know, so the on-watch team would do all of that. But then, you know, you'd have downtime, and I mean, downtime if you're not any of those assignments. It could be just sitting up on the deck waiting for the next thing to do, or waiting for your turn at the helm. But as a newbie, as a rookie on board, Gabe would then take me and he'd say, "We're going to learn the lines, Doc, right? So here we go, line to line to line to line." And we'd repeat them and then say, how does it work and what's it do? We'd go around the whole ship, you know, and then you get back to the beginning and say, all right, Doc, now you know, let's do it. And like, yeah, now, you know, how much can you learn? How much can you forget? And so we kind of did this over and over and over again, and then we'd do it differently. You'd say, all right, now we're going to do it when you set a sail. Which line goes first? Which sail goes first? You know, and then second, third, fourth. And so on that whole sail to Tahiti, we just endlessly went over it. And at one point, you know, the captain was, you know, was, again, great man of few words sometimes. I'd say, you know, I mean, how do you learn all these lines? And he said, Doc, did you go to medical school? He said, your average sailor can't read or write in the 1800s. They learn them. Don't give me any excuses. And then you just walk away, you know. So anyway, that's the last discussion of, you know, how hard it is to learn the lines. We all learn the lines. Let me comment if anybody's interested. I left some interesting things on the table on the way out, one of which is the worksheet. So they give you blanks, all the pin rail pins, and you learn it, you write it, you could study it. So you get a handle of, you know, the names and all that, and you'll see my attempt to work with that. All right, so again, part of just lines, and eventually we got it. Helm, the other job. So when you get the helm is 1 hour on duty. You were given a compass course, and with that, I remember taking that over, thinking, well, I'll be good at this. I've been steering boats all my life, but couldn't have been harder at first. My sailboat, 1.5 turns, and that's as far as you can go. The rudder's all the way over. This one, 9 turns to the right, 9 turns to the left. So each turn was a mere 3 degrees of the rudder. So it's a workout. Your arms are going, and being a traditional design, there was no real mechanical advantage. There was no hydraulics or anything. When you're turning, it's pulleys basically, but that's how you're moving the ship. So again, 280 tons, and you sort of had a heading. You're off 5 degrees, so you turn to the right, nothing would happen. You turn a little more to the right, nothing happened. You turn a little more, and now it starts to turn, and now it won't stop. And so you're like, no, the other way. And then the captain, who frequently would not be on deck, but he was monitoring at some level, would come out and say, "Who's steering the ship?" and you'd look at the wake, and it'd be this nice little S turn, and then everyone would give you a tip, and you'd get a little better, and then in the end, the most important thing they said was the compass was slow. So like, you know, the ship turns before the compass turns, and they said, forget the compass, you know, sort of use it eventually, but line up a cloud, line up a star, you know, line up something, and just when the ship moves, start, you know, correcting, and then, you know, eventually got I'd say pretty good, but a lot of work, a lot of learning. And then I put this picture out because the other job, and many people thought the best job was forward lookout. And so when you were a lookout, you were sent to the bow, and you were there for 1 hour. The rule was no one can talk to you, you know, and the idea is you're responsible to be a lookout, and you're looking for ships, which there are almost never, you know, land, which they, you know, they wanted to be traditional. They knew on the radar that we're getting close, but they wanted us to say we see land when that applied. And then, but the biggest dreaded thing, you know, if anybody saw the Redford movie, would be the containers. Everybody dreads hitting a container because, you know, our weight in that, you know, and who knows what would happen. So you're really looking out for trouble. And then when your hour was up, someone would relieve you, and you would do what's called ship's check. And you would literally go bow to stern, every compartment, you know, if there's sleeping people, you know, are they breathing, you know, do you smell gas, do you smell leaks, if the engine's on, you know, everything, you know, there's somebody in the engine room, but, you know, you make sure he was alive. Literally, they said your responsibility is to see that the engine guy who's got a bunch of ear headset protection on, you know, if there's carbon monoxide or something, you know. So the idea is you'd open the door, he'd wave, and he's like, good, you know. So it's like check, check, check. You do the whole thing, and then finally get back to the stern and report to the mate and say, ship check completed, either all's well, or, you know, something's loose, we need to fix this, whatever it was. So so that was the forward lookout. All right, and then let's see. 8 o'clock, you know, usually you'd have 2 watches on. So ours was ending, and the 8 to 12 watch was coming on. That would be frequently a time where you'd set more sails. They would often make it lighter overnight just to, you know, in case it got nasty, you don't have as many people awake. So you'd set more sails if the weather allowed it, and then we could eat. You know, the bell ring, 8 o'clock, we could go eat breakfast, and then we're off till 4 in the afternoon. And this was a common scene. Again, this was midships. This is the cargo hatch covering, you know, so that all came off, and, you know, we could lower the cargo into the lower part of the ship. But this would be a typical scene, you know, sleeping, writing home, typing on your computer. Some people would watch movies, you know, but there's also an endless list of maintenance chores. So the on-watch people, they would have maintenance jobs anyway because it's their work time. But if you were awake and, you know, and not too tired and didn't have something else to do, the unwritten rule was, you know, feel free to pitch in any time. This was called rust busting, when all this steel and salt, you know, salt water constantly had to chip, rust, prime, and repaint. And it got very intense when we were coming near a port. I think they always recognized that their best advertisement was a beautiful ship, you know, not an ugly ship coming in, because that's how they would recruit future, you know, crew members. So anyway, spent more than enough time doing this. Tarring the rig, again, those hemp lines, especially the important ones that you climb on, you know, they age in the sun, but when you tarred them, they would last much longer. And then sometimes they would break, and there'd be, you know, skills of replacing them. Oiling all the wood. The deck would get oiled, and then the wooden blocks, which are the pulleys, basically, they would be oiled. So there's just all that. And then there's big projects, and this is an interesting one. At one point along the way, the topgallant, one of the topgallant yards, so again, the second to the top cross piece, snapped. And they said, oh yeah, we were expecting that. We knew it had a weak spot in it. You know, like, so it was cracked in the middle of the night. They took the sail in, they brought all the debris down. And then, like, what do? We make a new one. This is what they do in the 1800s. They had all the lumber on board. They had that DB from Pitcairn, and they basically did the, I don't know the carpentry term, where you overlay things so that all the weak spots aren't lined up together. And it was, I think, 8 or 9 ply, and we ended up having this massive epoxy glue-a-thon and then clamping. You can see all that. And in the end, it was about 30 feet long, and then the hand sanding began, you know, one bit at a time, and then staining, and then 2 weeks later, we had a yard arm, you know, and it was like screw the hardware back in, put in the blocks, up it goes, and, you know, and now we're fully ready to ship again. So so anyway, that was that. And then lastly, many afternoons, 4 o'clock or so, 5, the captain or one of the mates would have a workshop, and it was just skills, you know, time to learn skills. So this would be typical, learning knots and splices, and, you know, knife maintenance and sharpening, how to take care of your tools, celestial navigation. Which, you know, again, and in fact, the professional crew did in fact navigate by the stars and the sun, and you always had the GPS as backup, but they used that to check their accuracy on a daily basis. Anyway, and just other, you know, it's just skills over and over again, and you know, and then so anyway, back to the itinerary a little bit. So this was our arrival in Tahiti, again, bustling port. And the interesting thing is, you know, there were 3 cruise ships in port when we got there. And, you know, something that hadn't occurred to me, but, you know, I always love to say I felt like a rock star for the first time. That as we were approaching the dock, everybody was there. Like, I think they were all like, oh, you didn't tell us there'd be a cruise ship arriving. So, I mean, a tall ship arriving. So I think I got my picture taken, you know, probably 1,000 or 10,000 times, you know, and then as we're coming in, we're doing all the, I mentioned the skiff is our tugboat, and, you know, and there's a lot of line throwing to the longshoremen, and then incredible amount of pulling. You line 20 people on a line to move the ship 1 or 2 feet, you know, leaning as far back as you can, everybody, and they'd have these, heave, and we, you know, just barely moving. You know, it'd be about maybe an hour of intense work, and then finally the captain said, all right, we're good, and then it'd be, the word is set the watch, which is one of the watches was now on for 24 hours, and the other 2 were off for 48 hours, so you know, you were on 1 and off 2. And then the interesting thing is that's when the crowd, that's when we were allowed to talk, you know, you could step on shore, and everybody, as we used to say, then the 10 questions began, which is, how big is she? Where are you from? Where's the crew? Da, 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 you know, and then, where are you going next? So this is, it was it's probably like I always say, like a book author doing their tour. You know, you get to answer all the same questions over and over and over again. But anyway, so Tahiti, ironically, was nothing special. You know, it's got the legendary name, but people only go there to go somewhere else. You know, you go to Maria or Bora Bora or somewhere else, but it's really kind of a dirty city. And, you know, a pretty island, but, you know, overdeveloped and overgrown and polluted and all the rest. But the highlight for me was that, you know, I got to learn to go aloft, you know, so they don't let you go aloft till you've been thoroughly trained and checked out. And I love to sort of say that, you know, halfway to Tahiti, I'm watching the crew go aloft and do another one of their sail sets. And I, you know, said to the captain, I said, you know, I really kind of want to do this. I feel like it's an essential experience, part of the trip. But, you know, I've never been great with heights, and I'm kind of scared. And, you know, I said, what if you fall? I mean, the lowest yard is 40 feet. The highest one is like 100 feet, you know. If you fall, you're going to die. I mean, how do you make sure you don't fall? And he looked at me and says, don't fucking let go, you know? And, so pardon the French, but it's French Polynesia. But anyway, you know, but he then kind of winked and he said, you know, I'm not worried about you. You know, people like you don't fall. He said, you know, the 1 or 2 tall ship people who die a year are the professionals who've been up 500 times, and they think they know what they're doing, and they don't buckle in, and they, you know, they're just, you know, they're too cool for safety. It's like the young kids who don't wear bike helmets. I don't need to do that. So anyway, it's, you know, in the end, he said, you'll be slow, you'll be careful, I think you'll be fine. And so then, now it's, you know, we're not in a rocking ship, we're at a dock, and Allison, again, my mate, the mate of my watch, said, you know, for 2 days, she said, you ready? Yeah, I'm almost ready. Ready? So we get the harness on, and then, so this is the look. So you gotta, first of all, you have to go on the outer rail, so, you know, you're actually over water when you start. And then, you know, for these things to work, they have to go inboard, and they can't go all the way to the top. It's just too much of a run. So they go inboard, and, you know, the first thing is, you know, the rules, you know, you're 3 points of attachment at any point. So your harness is actually not attached when you're moving. It's only attached when you're stable somewhere. So as you're climbing, it's like 1 arm, 2 arms, 1 foot, 2 foot. And, you know, some of those young guys, they would sprint. You know, I always joke they could go vertically as fast as I could run horizontally. They were amazing at this, but I was very slow and careful. And then you get to this, you know, the dreaded futtocks. So if you can appreciate that, that's where you actually have to go backwards, because you have to get to the next platform, and again, you're not attached. So, so you know, here's the move. You know, so you get there, and you literally have to do a blind reach above the platform, you know, in 2 hands, and then your feet kind of walk through. You don't see the rungs, you can't see your feet. And you get around, and you just, the first time, you can imagine, you just gasp, and you're there, like, and then you have to do it in reverse coming back. That's where you have to lean back and blindly find the spot with your foot. And again, the pros do it literally in the dark with their eyes closed, you know, and you know, very, very impressive, but very intimidating. But anyway, you know, I found, so then the 2 great, you know, moments of fear really were that, when you had to lean back, and the second is where you had to step out onto the foot rope on the yard arm. So again, 3 points of attachment. There's 1 big long step, your foot, your arm, second arm, pull over, and then you could, you know, you could clip in your harness at that point. You could like go, oh, I'm okay, you know, for now, until you have to do it in reverse. And then most of the work, when you're actually working, was right in front of you. You're either pulling sail, tying knots, you know, possibly servicing blocks or whatever. But you know, you're sort of within this 1 foot in front of your nose focus, and it didn't feel like much. A little nerve-wracking when someone joined you. They don't, you know, the word is, you know, laying on. I mean, you know, someone says, I'm laying on or laying off. Well, you're on your foot rope, and then someone steps on, seesaw. They go down, you go up, right? So you know, first time you do that, you feel like you're dying, right? You know, and then like so many other things, you actually get belly on, and you feel like, what if I flip forward? Anyway, it's a lot of moments, where you say, wow, don't want to do that again, but then you do it. And then the other thing though is you're working, and then I love this last picture. Then all of a sudden, that's the foot rub move actually. If you sort of look like you go from there, and going up these are the ratlins, the ladder, and you have to step out to the foot ropes there. So, but then you do this. This is the look from down. So when you're folding sails or loosening sails or whatever, that's the deal. So. So the interesting thing is most people were. I couldn't do that. It was too painful for me. So I had to wear either the Tevas, but then those you could see how those ratlins got narrower as they got tight. I found that the higher you got, the tighter they got. I ended up going to my sneakers just because they fit in and out better by the end. But I could never go barefoot the whole voyage. All right. Well, back to the itinerary. I'll kind of zoom through some of this, but so. Tahiti we left, and then we sailed to Huahine, another island of French Polynesia. Again, Captain said, you always know you're in Huahine. It's the pregnant lady on her back. And he said, she said, Polynesians have said that forever. He said, that's how you recognize it. You look for the pregnant lady. There's the ship. We were at a mooring, actually, tucked in the corner in this bay. And it was a couple interesting things. This is not a very commercial place. They really don't have hotels. I think one hotel on the island, but they do a lot of farming and fishing and just kind of home economy type stuff. We were able to rent a car and drove all around and explored a little bit. Met this guy Francois, a little hand-painted sign that says Vanilla Plantation, turn right here, free tours. And these are vanilla beans that are 40 years old that he's been tending his whole life. And free samples, and then he's growing 40 other fruits on his little farm. None of this monoculture stuff. They just grow whatever they grow, and they feed the island and feed the rest of French Polynesia. And then the other thing we did for the first time is, my first time was the small boat trips. So that we lowered the monomoy, and then you sail the lagoons. And the way that most of these islands being atolls, you had a reef, with breaking waves, and then a lagoon, which is shallow and calm and protected. So it's really like a big lake. And usually color differences, deep blue water and then light green with sand at the bottom. So we would sail around like this, and small boat handling is part of the experience. The captain said everybody will learn how to handle small boats. So this was both sailing and rowing. And again, I felt comfortable with that, so I tended to just sort of hang around, and I was actually a teacher more or less with this. I love this picture. This is our Dikembe. He's one of the 18-year-olds from Bermuda, and definitely this is like how he was every day. He was just the happiest guy on earth, and took that picture. But this would be like time off, having fun, anyway, from there we went to Bora Bora, and interesting. Captain said he deliberately wanted to go from one to the other because he said this is a westernized Polynesian island. He said here's where if you're on your honeymoon, you've got serious business to attend to, you go to Bora Bora, right? And the most romantic place on earth, most beautiful place on earth. But he said most people, they land at one of the out islands, and then they get ferried over to another out island where the hotels are, and they're all designed to look at the central island with this beautiful view. And but he said they're all in concentration camps. They actually the only Polynesians they meet is the waiter and the bartender and maybe the lady who changes their sheets, and that's it. And those people get ferried in and out every day. So it's really like they created I don't know, Miami or something in the middle of the Pacific. So but then we were actually anchored in the middle, and we never went out here. We actually went ashore and again rented scooters for the first time, toured the island, met lots of great people, some local restaurants, and so it's just an interesting. And again, the captain said, now you kind of see the extremes. Huahine and Bora Bora, and I just want to include this because first time we got to raise the anchor. Okay, so we had anchored here, and this is called a windlass. No, they did it wrong. Hang on, let's go back to there. All right, so 5 people per side, each cycle 1 chain link. All right, 5 inches. The chain would be, we say they call them shots, which was probably morally, survivable. A shot is 90 feet. We would have 2 or 3 shots depending on the conditions. So up to 270 feet of chain, and then the anchor was 1,500 pounds at the end of that. So basically, it was the hardest thing I ever did. Any one of us, it's kind of eye level to the deck, and about 6-7 minutes, and you really couldn't go anymore. And they'd kind of pause, swap it out. And again, you rest, and then it'll be your turn again. There's water, lots of water buckets, and pitchers and everything. But I like this one because this was sort of the anchor's up. This is how people look. And the hard part is because now they say, now go up and loose the sails because now we got a sail, right? So that other stuff, the line that began at this point. So leaving harbor by anchor was just unbelievably hard, just the hardest thing we'll ever do. And I love one other point to point out here. This is Tammy again, the fiance. Notice how comfortable she looks. She brought the baby, but that would have been too difficult, so she also had a nanny. She had been a trainee. She met the captain as a trainee on a previous voyage, and she never did anything. I mean, she just never. She looked a lot and said, "Boy, you guys are doing a good job," So behind her back became known as Queen Tammy. So everybody's tired and sweaty except her. And if the baby cried, she called the nanny. So anyway, enough about Tammy. Next, we then crossed to the Cook Islands, and a nation of 20,000, and our first stop was the island of Aitutaki. And another unique thing here is they did have an airport, which many of these islands didn't, but very limited in hotels, but they did not have a deep harbor. So that what we did, if you can appreciate where we were, there's the reef and the breaking waves and the lagoon inboard, and unbelievably scary. The captain with the engine on was aiming for the reef, and I've said it's the equivalent of sailing in towards Nantasket Beach, and the waves are breaking, and we probably got 50 feet from the breaking waves. And to do it traditionally, instead of looking at a depth meter, he did a lead line, which is a line you throw in till it hits bottom, and then someone can tell how deep it is. And he's at the stern yelling, "Take a sounding," and somebody would say, "Can't, no sounding, can't tell the depth." And then another one. And he finally they said 40 feet, now, drop the anchor right now. And then we basically we parked there, and he said, yeah, it's 40 feet at the bow, 2,000 at the stern. That's the way these volcanic islands just drop off. So we're just on a little shelf, and while we were there, if you're on watch, you would have an anchor watch, and your job was to watch, things start moving, we need to know right away, because if the wind shifted, you're on the reef, and it wouldn't be so bad if you went backwards. You'd just be hanging an anchor, and you just have to deal with it. But anyway, the interesting thing is you say, how could that possibly work? And the great physics thing I learned is that there's only a few cuts where the water, where there's a break where we could take our skiff in and out. And it turns out that the waves break over the reef, but then they can't get back, so all the water has to go out the cuts. And they literally form a river. There's like rapids. So if you lined up in the river, you were being pushed backwards. So if you could get the anchor to hold, you'd generally, unless there was some gale wind blowing you towards the reef, you'd be settled, in that way. But it was, after the fact, they explained it at the time. We're like, oh my God, we're going to park there, So anyway, the other thing, so this is where we got to see our first Polynesian dancing. So about 4 versions of this, and everybody learns to dance out there. This is, instead of doing ballet or gymnastics, this is what people do, and so you can imagine it keeps you pretty fit, and it was just a cultural thing that any village you went to, you could see dancing just either at hotels or just this was at an outdoor market and everything. So that was one of the highlights of being there. We did another one of the small boat trips. This was a place called 1 Foot Island. It's 5 miles from the ship. You can kind of appreciate the coral reef. So we basically snorkeled. We took the little boat, got all the way there, and picnicked. And then, of course, the wind died, so we had to row 5 miles back to the ship across this. So long but fun day. Victor there showing the beautiful scene. And then another fun thing is, we were always like the big show in town. Like, a tall ship comes to a small island. So the schools all came out. So I was on watch one day, and all the school kids came out, and we gave tours, and they sang us songs. They gave us their homemade passion fruit jelly. The most amazing thing is they gave us mail. They said, oh, you're going to, next island? Because mail was very, very sketchy, and they have relatives on all the other Cook Islands, and all these packages to go to their relatives, and all we would do is get to the dock, and somebody there would say, oh, we'll get them, small island, we know who they're for. So that's kind of how they work out there. All right, so then we went to Rarotonga, capital of the Cook Islands, and really probably my favorite place, and I would say most of the cruise. Capital of a country, 14,000 people, so smaller than Hingham. The only roads, kind of go around. There's an outer coast road and then an inner, kind of foothills road. A lot of farming going up the hills, and you can picture just beautiful lagoons. But they have a fascinating thing in the Cook Islands. By law, nobody can own anything, businesses, unless they're a citizen. so that 100% of the economy is owned by people who live in Rarotonga. So that every hotel, every restaurant, every clothes store. And I wear this. This is my one of my favorite souvenirs. So if you all came here wondering what do I have in common with Kate Middleton, well, Kate and I shop the same place. Apparently, Kate, when she was here, I don't know if it was a honeymoon or some other reason, but she discovered this store called Tab that someone else referred me to. And it's a storefront where in the windows on the right you see all these ladies making prints, and not made in China, making beautiful prints, and then the left side is retail. And they had men's shirts and women's dresses, and I guess Kate liked them, and so did I. So we both have one. So I just love wearing it. It's a really nice feel and a nice look, and it's unique because every one of them is one of a kind. You don't see two that look like this. So anyway, that was that. But again, we hiked one day. We went on a hiking day, climbed to the top of one of these mountains. Church singing. Captain told us if you do anything, whatever your beliefs are, you got to go to church on Sunday. Is the most amazing experience because he had another comment. He said, if you grow up in the Cook Islands, no one ever tells you you're not a good singer. You just sing, and he said, we Americans and Canadians, he said, someone tells you you're good at soccer, but you're not a good singer, so you play soccer the rest of your life or something. But everybody sings. It's just universal. And so in church, a lot of things were a cappella. They would just announce a song and everyone would sing, and it was like you're in the Mormon tabernacle. There was 4-part harmony, and someone said, be as loud as you can, everybody. So it was like vibrating, and it wasn't, it'd be like 80 people or 100 people, and absolutely incredible. And it was repeated, like every island, would have the singing, and I went to about 10 churches, and they were subtly different and fantastic, every one. And last but not least, this is a famous place for Polynesian tattoos. This is Dan Guns from Vancouver, and he was one of the many. They said, I think 15 people all went to the same tattoo guy, and I put them back to back because they all said this was a religious experience too, that this guy would literally, you would tell him your life story and what your hopes and aspirations and where you've been and where you're going, and with no template or anything, he would start going, and then in the end he would say, oh, this thing means this, whatever, and this means that, and they all went out of there saying, this is the best thing I ever did in my life. I will look at this and cherish it as long as I live. And I can't say I got one, but I think 15 of the crew of all ages got them while we were there. As we were leaving Rarotonga, our next destination was Palmerston, which is really one of the smallest inhabited islands probably anywhere. And they don't really have any regular transportation. Again, no airport, no deep sea port. And so, they only see 2 or 3 ships a year visit Palmerston. And so they put an ad in the local paper. We were actually in Rarotonga for, I think, 10 days. We put an ad in the paper saying, we're going to Palmerston. Any cargo, any people want to go, we're leaving Saturday. So basically, cargo starts arriving. People all have families between the islands. And I think 5 or 6 passengers showed up. And this lady, I think, was 81. She had not, this is her home, but she hadn't been there in 2 or 3 years. And then there was actually a telecommunications guy who was going to go there and work on the Wi-Fi, but he would be stuck there for 3 months till the next ship could get him off. And then we literally had an incredible cargo loading day where we basically had to lift a tremendous amount of stuff. They transport most things in freezers, dry goods in freezers, and then when a ship comes again, they have frozen fish that they've caught, and they send it frozen back to the island, and that's how they kind of run their economy in Palmerston anyway. So I don't know if you remember that cargo. I actually cheated a little. That wasn't my lashing day. That was a cargo day, it was a cargo hold full of freezers. They're all the big stand-up top, open top ones. Anyway, this is Palmerston, so it doesn't look like much. We sailed 4 days to get here, half a mile long, half a mile diameter, I should say. Full population 81, but at any given time people are gone, and then gone till they can get back. The guy I ended up staying with, his wife and daughter were gone for a year because she needed her tonsils out. And that meant going to Rarotonga and then going to New Zealand and then enrolling in school for the year because she couldn't get back. And then she was going to somehow get back summer to then come back, home. So you say goodbye, see you in a year or whenever the next ship is coming. So there were 47 on the island when I was there. Fascinating story. William Marsters came there in 1863, I think. He brought a wife and 2 mistresses and started 3 lines. And everybody on the island today is named Marsters. And they have the same 3 lines, and they literally divided it with thirds, and which whoever your ancient mother was, that's where your family lives. And then of course there's some cross marrying, and they try to cross marry, but there's now I think like 4,000 or 5,000 Palmerston descendants throughout Cook Islands, New Zealand, Australia, but they all feel like they're still from Palmerston. And this is it, Main Street. So the damage on the left was from a previous typhoon where people used to live, and they just abandoned these homes and then moved further inland where they were more protected. But then they rebuilt their church, so this is their beautiful little church. And the interesting thing is there's virtually no money because there's nothing to use. There's nothing to use it on. Everything is just, the food that you've gotten on the ship, the fish you catch. There's some pigs and chickens running around, but there's no way to spend money. And and so when people visit, you stay with homes. Essentially they have this culture of hospitality that they almost race to be the first one to take you in. And then and of course as we came in with a big crowd, we were distributed among the whole group. So this is their internet. So you would actually come here, sit on the bench, and you could log on extremely slow. They had diesel power 6 to 12 in the morning, 6 to 12 at night. So half the day they had electricity, the other half they didn't. And that's how their youth were actually getting exposed to the world of Facebook, things like that, which is all new, you can imagine. This is the medical clinic where they had a nurse who was on a 2-year assignment from Fiji, and they had not seen a doctor in 2 years. And so the captain asked me before we got there, he said, do you mind seeing any patients, or if they anybody cares to see you? I said, whatever, sure. So anyway, she called every house and said, you want to come see the doctor? And they're like, they thought about it, and then they all started coming. So in 3 days, I saw 42 of the 47 people. And most of them were, I say at the baby, there was a 4-month-old baby that I saw, and 91-year-old Mama Aka, and I love all the mamas that were all this, top generation, grandmas, great grandmas. They all came up and hugged me. They say, oh, doctor, and they give me a hug and a kiss, and then they'd say, how are you doing? No, I'm fine. I just want to see the doctor, and just tell me I'm okay. I said, they all speak English, fortunately. Yeah, they're New Zealand is their sort of former connection, I guess, of the Cook Islands. They also speak Maori, which is the Polynesian tongue, fluent in both. And then French Polynesia, they also have the third French, so 3 languages there. So yeah, it was easy, fortunately. And then so I did the clinic, and fascinating medicine. They had basically a very limited number of medicines, no lab, no X-ray. The nurse did what she could. If she thought you needed a medicine, they basically ordered it and it would come in 3 or 4 months. They had a few like a blood pressure or diabetes medicine. They treated diabetes, without much monitoring really. So it's just so alien to what we're used to here. But nobody seemed to care. I mean, it's like this is all they know is what they expect. Low expectations. But anyway, the last day we were there was what they call Thanksgiving, and I think it was April 1st. And that was their Thanksgiving, and they got through typhoon season, and everybody lived, and nothing was ruined. They didn't get hit this year. Big feast, and all the families, that previous one, the families had their own color that sort of identified what was your lineage. So we had a bunch of blues and a bunch of purples, and there's one other, and everybody just brought out food, and a big church ceremony in the morning, and then they all dressed up, and it was going to be our departure day as well. So essentially, just spreads like this, you would insult them if you didn't visit all 3 families. So they like feed you, and you just keep going. Anyway, I'll get back to that. So in the end, it was just a fascinating place. Everybody on the ship kind of said, never be anywhere like Palmerston again. It's just it's a world lost in time, and. Anyway, next destination was, again, I think the captain loved to sort of do the contrast that we went to Pago Pago in American Samoa, which is the busiest port in the Pacific. So we pulled up to a dock with container ships, forklifts everywhere. They had star-kissed tunas, main bases there across the harbor. You could see tons of tuna ships. Right at the dock, McDonald's, right down the road, Kmart. And as many of you may know without realizing it, their main export, people say, is NFL players. And they are very big people, all, more 300-pounders than I've ever seen in my life. Football is king. They're ahead of everything else. And, someone said currently, that was last year, they had 23 NFLers right now. So that brings a lot of money. You can imagine you go in the U.S., you play football, you make a few $1 million. There's a lot of donated football fields and high schools and things like that. So it really helps them. When we got there, it was Flag Day, and again, the captain loved to call it Dependence Day. He said 1 out of 3 people on the island work for the U.S. government, and they absolutely love that. And the worst thing would be for us to say, "Do you want to be independent?" And they're like, "No, we want your money." But they decorated way better than we do on the 4th of July. These red, white, and blue coconuts were lining the city. I mean, everywhere. And then when I did about a 10-mile drive on a road along the coast to go to his football field. I'll show you in a second for a show. And there was bunting the whole way. I mean, there's like miles of red, white, and blue bunting. Got to this football field, and this was these song and dance numbers. Each color was a village, and a village might have 300 or 400 people. And this is the people who like were in their team dance or whatever it was, their show. So like everybody who could stand pretty much would come out and do a dance and a song, and then they would move on. And then, no, that was the on deck circle back there. That was the next village. So this went on all day long. It was just the big, celebrate our flag, our American flag. So that was fascinating. And very cool. This is how you get around there. Somehow they invented this little Toyota modified school bus truck, and you could pick them by the sign said which part of the island they were going to and what are you in the mood for. Some would be rap music, some would be rock, some would be videos. They'd be showing videos or movies, Disney or whatever. And the idea is you walk on, you put $1 on the dashboard, and they just go where you go, and you tell them when you get off. And that's the only public transportation, and they're everywhere. And they all, I think they designed them to try to attract business. They just, they're all unique. And I love this one because you don't usually see our taxi drivers with their little nips hanging from their mirror. Public. We got Jim Beam and some Bacardi vodka and all that. So that's the guy that drove me one of my trips. So anyway, fascinating place. All right. So then our last, second to last, but we get back to Rarotonga. But our last new island was the Kingdom of Samoa, and I'm sorry, Kingdom of Tonga. Kingdom of Tonga. And Tonga's two island groups. The northern group they call the Vava'u group, and this is the town and village of Niafu. And the captain said, that was the busiest harbor, in the Pacific. He said, this is the best harbor where you wind through these passages, almost like the coast of Maine, so that you're protected on all sides. If there's a typhoon or anything, this is where you would want to be. It was their low season. He said, this is full of cruisers. All the guys like me who dream of crossing the on a small sailboat, they all wind up here, spend some time because it's a great place to stay, and they support traveling, passing, sailors going through. But again, it was just kind of school season and not tourist season, so it was kind of quiet. But what I love is that this is the dress. The term called a pareo in the Cook Islands, and they call it a lava in Tonga. But anyway, it's this kind of mini skirt, maxi skirt, whatever you call it. And this was school children in their school uniforms. So I'm just walking down the street, and they all say, can I take your picture? Oh, yes, take your picture. And they always say, middle school tough guys, right? This looks like what my son used to do, right, Colin? But the toughest guy on the team is wearing his, knee-length skirt, and the stripes mean you're a little older, a little higher up in rank. And then the teachers, same thing. So that's flip-flops are universal. Bankers wearing suits, would be wearing flip-flops, and one of them would be wearing a suit and tie, and then the guy next to him would be wearing this. So this was the look there. A very simple place, very limited tourism, kind of self-contained, markets, where they sell their produce, and this I love because my favorite store sign, what do you need? You need food, shoes, rings, boat engine, prom dress, wedding dress, furniture. This is, you could use one of these in Hingham, right? So, anyway, all right. So so we had a few days there, and we actually got delayed leaving. Our last trip was going to be a 10-day sail back to Rarotonga for the end of our leg. We got delayed one day by a tropical depression. The captain, drenched like I've never seen, rained 24 hours. Captain said we could leave today, but it'd be totally miserable. Let's just stay one more day. But the storm will pass, but it's going to give us the biggest seas that we have seen. And so he kind of warned us. He said, as we're leaving the harbor, we leave that beautiful harbor, and it was as smooth as can be. We got out in the open, and suddenly it changed. And we put up these things called man ropes, which so there's nowhere you could walk without having something to hold on to, So anyway, let me just see if I can get this to play. So 15 to 20-foot seas, and occasionally 25-foot waves coming at us. And so this was the scene. This went on for 3 days. And I guess this is where everybody proved that we really weren't getting seasick anymore. Yeah, the upper deck, they said, was about 18 feet. So some of the waves were clearly above that. I do remember once I was at the helm, and a lot of fighting as you're steering. And Allison, this is Allison, so this is my mate, the mate of my watch. So she was walking to the rear as I'm steering facing forward, and she gasped. And she's like, whoa! And I said, what's the matter? She goes, don't look behind you. So of course, and the wave was well above my head, and I don't know what I was already 20 feet up, and so it, just lifts the ship, because we were going with it. Fortunately, we're going with the wind, with the waves. So while it was big and impressive, it actually probably felt better to me than that squall, early on. So anyway, it was beautiful sailing, and we got 1 day out of Rarotonga, 1 day from the end of the voyage. And again, sign was posted on the scuttle, which is where they announce things. Our last marlin spike, and so everybody had, we were all into the pareos at that point, and the girls had spent a week polishing and varnishing their coconut bras. All right, so and again, this is an example of the kids. These girls are all 20s or 18s, whatever. Good old Dawson there, Dikembe, and this is one of our pro crew. She was one of the lead seamen, and then me and the gang having one last rum punch, and not on watch, and of course my pareo there. We all had to dress the part. Anyway, that night, the captain, held a muster after the party was sort of winding down, and gathered around, and he sort of said, "This is it. Tomorrow we're done." Kind of one of those, take a look around. This is not my ship. This is our ship. Nobody sails a ship without excellent teamwork, cooperation. Put your personality quirks aside. Do the job, and you get to sleep because someone else is on watch and watching the ship and making it happen. And he said, we've really all done it. We've all grown up, and he kind of had some a couple of things. I thought I'd just play this. I wish I could say I took this, but I found this online. It's from the Picton Castle. Someone else must have had a better camera than me. But one of the things is I almost close. I reread my old nice little log that I kept. Oh, did I hit the wrong one? I did. I'm sorry. Let's try that again. Is that going to work? Hopefully that's going to work. The captain, he basically said, here's what I wrote. I wrote, last night the captain held a twilight muster to recognize how far we had come, relate that, we'll tie up in Rarotonga tomorrow. He stated how few people on the planet ever get to do what we've done, how the voyage never really ends but stays with you the rest of your life, changes you, how we won't be returning to the, quote, real world, but rather this is the real world where every action has a consequence and for good or bad, and there's no slackers. Everybody needs to contribute. He said he wants us all to take a minute and appreciate the perfect sailing conditions we're experiencing. Full and by, that means all the sails are set perfectly and drawing perfectly. Everything trimmed to perfection. Star and moon field sky. Modest seas, steady trade winds. And basically, I took the helm, that night, and I got my hour on helm. I said it was just like, perfect ending. And we did tie up the next morning, and again, I went up. I finally took my own camera aloft. I realized I'd never done this, so we had to stow the sails the last time. As we pulled in, you have to go up and tie them all up. Handed my camera to the person out on the yardarm, and I do remember just looking around. So we're back at Rarotonga, and looking at the mountains and the harbor and the 60, 80 feet down or whatever it is, and just sort of saying, oh my God, I can't believe I'm done. And then followed by one more time, get down safely. Don't screw it up now. And then the very final thing, that's the last picture we sort of got second to last. This was actually bathroom wall graffiti that I saw in Tonga like 1 week earlier, and there are a bunch of cute sayings that I saw that. I said, well, that's interesting because that's sort of what I just did. I suppose I got to do it now. And then again, the final morning when I was departing on a plane that night, they actually have a little graduation thing, and actually the captain and Tammy were staying on to get married in Rarotonga. Many of the crew were staying on, but I actually tried to get home early. My daughter's prom was going to be that week, and I had been along. I was ready to be home anyway. So anyway, I was able to move my flight up a week, and so I was really the only one leaving that day. Everyone else was staying. But they have a little graduation ceremony. They actually give you C certificate, which you'll see over there. It's, some people use it professionally for advancement. It said I did 4,000 miles, 3 months. If you're a merchant mariner, you use that to get your next promotion. You need time at sea. But they also do something I think very special. They bring you up and they do this. They tie this around your neck, which is this Polynesian fish hook. And you actually see these on people everywhere in this part of the world. They tell you that they're just they stand for, quote, strength, prosperity, peace, and radiant health. And they say, but they also are felt to protect mariners at sea. So I haven't taken it off since then. It's I've never been a jewelry wearer or anything, but this is the exception. And it's really nice because you do feel it every day. And you sort of, if life is busy or stressful, you can sort of touch it and say, well, that's a little sign of where we've been. So there we are, and that's it. So thank you. Appreciate you all coming. So, and obviously, actually, one thing I forgot to say. But at the table over there, a couple things. There's a white bag over there. We call it ditty bag, and it's just interesting. I can answer questions for anybody, but that was something everybody made. But what it encompasses is all the different skills one needs to make a traditional sail. The ring eyelet, the spliced lines, how to double seam the canvas so that it's strong enough to not rip in the wind. So you had to make a ditty bag, and someone was teaching you and criticizing you, and then when you finally were good enough, then you were allowed to actually work on the sails, so they knew what you were doing. Again, I have this sheet, which is the worksheet for all the lines. The crew book, which I forgot to mention, but it's really what I got before we left, all the terms you had to learn. And as a sailor, I only knew half of them. There's like incredible different language you had to learn, the commands and how that works. So a lot of interesting things over there. So anyway, thanks for coming. I'll stay and answer any questions anybody wants. Come on up or whatever, or maybe take them now.
I had two questions. I assume it was a steel hull.
Steel hull.
Okay. And did you see any of the trash that increasingly have been reported out in the Pacific from all kinds of places, including Fukushima and elsewhere?
Right.
Did you run into any of that? I take it that's
right.
why you had a lookout forward for something like that.
Right. So two questions. It was steel hull. Yes, it was a steel hull. And second, did we run into any trash, that people talk about in the Pacific? And the answer is none. We saw none at all. We were fishing the whole time, catching fish and eating them. No trouble with that. Incredible how big the Pacific is. We brought the atlas down to just show. If you look at these 4,000 miles I did, it looks like this on the Pacific. So they keep going, right? They keep going around the world, and I think they run into everything eventually. But at least that's probably one of the last pristine places on Earth, I would say. Yeah, I saw no trash the whole time, and no containers, fortunately. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stay in. Come on up, or answer questions about anything on the table. And thanks for coming, and enjoy the end of summer. All right, end of summer in September. All right.